Here's the thing I always forget about al-Qaeda. For all their murderous intent and demonstrated capacity, for all their global plotting, for all the deadly serious implications of them getting access to even more deadly means of targeting us than they've already figured out, for all of the truly scary things that we have already figured out about al-Qaeda, it is easy to forget that on their own terms, they're often freaking ridiculous.
Come on, Barack, be honest for once.
That's not from The Onion doing a satire of a dorky American kid making a fake jihad video. This is actually the new al-Qaeda video. It's in English. It stars Adam Gadon, who's a kid who grew up on a goat farm in California. He was apparently a pretty serious dork and a pretty serious heavy metal fan when he was growing up. Now he's ended up living the dream of his inner super anti-hero, who he calls Azam the American, Azam al-Amriki, a.k.a. Adam the goat farm dork. And he runs the Al-Qaeda AV Club. The new Al-Qaeda AV Club video starts with this disclaimer: attention, we do not permit musical accompaniment with our productions. I'm guessing that's because they are religiously opposed to music, but they know they're competing with all sorts of slick fight the infidel videos from all over now, many of which could pass for bad rap videos, like this one from Somalia.
Month by month, year by year, keeping them kafirs living in fear.
It all started out in Afghanistan when we wiped the oppressor straight off the land.
Yeah, what's incredible about the new Al-Qaeda video, though, is just how lowbrow and lame it is, I guess. It's sort of like cable access punditry. I mean, this is Al-Qaeda, mighty Al-Qaeda, supposedly. And the dude is like making jokes about the Salahis crashing the state dinner, making jokes about Scott Brown. It's very strange.
Honestly, Barack, as a president who has proven himself to be incapable of keeping intruders out of his own executive mansion, do you really expect anyone to believe that you will be successful in your attempts to keep the Mujahideen away from an entire continent?
The Salahis did it.
As the recent loss of your party's traditional Massachusetts Senate seat shows, and as even you yourself have admitted, a large number of Americans are quickly losing their patience.
Also,
Stop wasting your time, Barack, and start making some serious moves. Come on, Barack, be honest for once. Just what is it that's stopping you from doing the right thing?
I know Al-Qaeda is Al-Qaeda, right? But is it okay to point out that they're ridiculous, that their propaganda is inadvertently funny, as in, haha, I'm laughing at you? These guys are like the reject pile at talk radio tryouts. And this is their stuff in English. This is supposed to be appealing to us. So that's the good news, I guess, about Al-Qaeda. The other good news about Al-Qaeda is this. This was Wednesday on Capitol Hill.
I'm just trying to get a baseline of where we're at in June 2010. How many Al-Qaeda members do we think reside in Afghanistan today?
Probably very small numbers, certainly perhaps in the double-digit numbers, that small, if any.
General Petraeus stating that the number of Al-Qaeda members in Afghanistan today is very small, double digits max, if any. Which does make it hard to explain that we're about to go up to 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan in order, supposedly, to fight Al-Qaeda, which General Petraeus says isn't really in Afghanistan in any significant numbers. What's cited as justification for staying in Afghanistan and for upscaling the number of our troops there is the doctrine of counterinsurgency. We're not just beating this elusive enemy in combat there, we're supposedly preventing them from ever coming back in Afghanistan via counterinsurgency. How's it going? Joining us now for the interview tonight is Dr. David Kilcullen, who advises General Stanley McChrystal in Afghanistan and who formerly advised General Petraeus in Iraq. He's a fellow at the Center for a New American Security and adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins. He's himself a combat veteran, and he's perhaps the world's leading authority on counterinsurgency. His latest book is called Counterinsurgency. It's just out from OUP. Dr. Kilcullen, thanks very much for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to be here. And just a point of clarification, I don't actually advise General McChrystal.
Oh, very good. Sorry to have said that.
That's okay.
If Al-Qaeda is not physically present in any great numbers in Afghanistan, does it make sense to be fighting a war supposedly to destroy that organization with 100,000 troops in Afghanistan?
I think you've got to distinguish between the requirement to destroy Al-Qaeda as a network and the need to stabilize Afghanistan. The two are linked, but I think they're quite separate endeavors, and I think that was a broader point that General Petraeus made in his testimony. I've always thought that one of the smartest things about this that's ever been said was actually by Osama bin Laden in November 2004, where he said, look, all I have to do is send 2 mujahideen to a given location, and the Americans will panic and send an army there, and it's very expensive for you and it's very cheap for me, and I can keep doing it, and you will run out of resources before I run out of places to send jihadists. And I think that kind of describes to some extent the al-Qaeda strategy and also a broader reality of counterinsurgency. It's just very cheap to run an insurgency compared to building a country and suppressing an insurgency.
Is there a cheaper and less deadly to Americans way to be pursuing the destruction of al-Qaeda than trying to stabilize Afghanistan?
Well, again, I think the two are actually quite separate, even though I know that the two issues have been linked in the way that our president has spoken about the issues. And I think there is some kind of a conceptual link. In practical terms, the problem in Afghanistan is not al-Qaeda, it's instability, and the instability results from the government of Afghanistan, from corruption, from all sorts of factors, as well as the Taliban. So it's a pretty complex picture. Al-Qaeda is in there, but it's not the dominant feature in my view.
The Marja offensive back in February was seen as a big test of doctrine in practice. Secure that town from the insurgents, establish legitimate government authority. It hasn't gone great. Reports today of gunfire at Richard Holbrooke's helicopter on his visit to Marja, attempted suicide bombings on the occasion of that visit. If Marja was a test case, was it a failure?
Well, I think the gunfire today and the attempt to hit Richard Holbrooke is more evidence, yet more evidence of the political smarts of the Taliban. They are certainly the most agile political opponent that we've dealt with, far better, in fact, than al-Qaeda at building support from a local population. And I think that the second thing that you said about Marja is the most important one. You said secure the city and then build legitimate government, and that's where the problems have resided, and it continues to be the biggest challenge in Afghanistan. One of the harsh and inescapable realities about counterinsurgency that I write about in my book is that you can only be as good as the government you're supporting. And you can be perfect at counterinsurgency as a set of tactics, and we're not. But even if we were, we can't be any better than the government we're working for. And that's really the problem right now in Afghanistan. When do you know if a counterinsurgency campaign isn't going to work? Is it just an assessment that your government partner is hopeless? Is it a recognition that you'll never be tactically accurate enough? No, I think actually it has to do with drawdown. And if you look at the broad sweep of history, and in the book I go into about 380 examples of counterinsurgency since the early 19th century, it turns out that you really don't know if it's worked or not until you start to draw down and you discover whether the legitimate government or the structure that you have built is strong enough to deal with the insurgents that remain. You never destroy an insurgency. What you do is drive it down and build up the local government to the point where the locals can handle the problem. And unfortunately, you don't really know if they can handle it until you start to pull out and you see whether they can do it on their own. That's something obviously that we'll get to see in the next year or two based on current US policy. David Kilcullen, author of the new book, Counterinsurgency, just out from Oxford University Press. Mr. Kilcullen, I would say today, obviously a very bad day for Australians in Afghanistan. And as an Australian and as a vet yourself, I know it must be a tough day. So thanks. Thank you. All right. North Korean athletes have certain advantages. Primarily, they are that their dear leader, Kim Jong-il, sends powerful, invisible mental energy in their general direction while the athletes compete. Later on, we have today's update on the sort of advantage those autocratic, megalomaniacal brainwaves gave North Korea at the World Cup this week. Please stay with us.